Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Expand Love Show. Today we have Chris on our show. He's got this amazing energy. He looks so amazing. He's been a raw vegan for 18 years. He's a registered holistic nutritionist. He is also a raw lifestyle coach and a Kundalini yogi. He also sings in his pastime. Welcome to the show. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate that. You did share a ton. I feel very, very blessed by it. And I guess the only other things I could really say is that I grew up in Saskatchewan, Canada. Now I live in Sweden. I also really love skateboarding, and I just feel really, really blessed to be shining a beacon for this path as it's brought me so much.
Wow, beautiful. So how did you get into the raw vegan journey?
Well, it all truthfully kind of started from my youth. I've been a skateboarder since I was 5 years old. And for a long time, that was really my singular mission. I just wanted to skateboard more, become a professional, and I couldn't see life without it. By the time I was 17, I moved away from home and first went to Vancouver. And basically my diet really went south. And, I started falling apart. I moved to Edmonton, Alberta when I was 18 because the legal drinking age was 18, and I had some good friends out there. And I was basically eating like bacon double cheeseburger pizzas for lunch. I was that guy that, my sister went vegetarian when I was 16, and I'd growl at her and pretend I was a T-Rex and talk about bacon. I was like silly like that. But when I was living in Edmonton and started falling apart, I really got to a place where I didn't want to live anymore, and where what at one point was drinking for fun and for like partying to get together with friends became escape. It became me numbing my feelings because I was really, really depressed. And I remember going to bed at night, not wanting to wake up. And I was mildly suicidal. I never did anything, but I wasn't really a happy fellow, and I wasn't recovering well, and I just wasn't feeling good in general. And so I knew I needed to find something. And the first big thing I found on my health journey was a Rodney Yee intermediate yoga VHS tape, because this was in 98. And it was in a Walmart discount bin of all things. I think it was like $2.99 in one of those big discount bins. Anyways, I took that home and started doing it all the time. It really, really helped me a lot, helped me ground, helped me feel more connected to my body, mind, spirit, and just slowed me down and got me out of my head. But it did also spark an interest in yogic philosophy, which I started reading up about. And that opened my eyes up to karma. Like I had no connection between food and wellness, physically, mentally, emotional, anything. And I started to see like, wow, this actually has a profound impact on many, many levels. So I wanted to find something more specific to diet. And the first thing I found was in a used bookstore called Fit for Life, which it's a really great book. It's still one that I recommend anyone and everyone check out. It's actually, I think, the most translated and most sold book on nutrition ever, with like billions of copies sold. And it really kind of overlaid a very basic framework of holistic health. So it talked about it not just being about diet, specifically in the diet realm. It talked about food combining. It talked about the importance of eating fruit on an empty stomach. It talked about vegetarian, vegan, and raw food diets. And I was just blown away. I couldn't believe it. Like, I just thought this was a pleasure tube. I would eat Taco Bell and thought that was like the pinnacle of my food choice for like energy. And I took it on right away. Like, I can honestly say that has been, I guess, 23 years ago now. And since then, I started eating fruit for breakfast, because that's what it said: eat fruit on an empty stomach as a meal, right? And I started food combining. And I can probably say in the last 23 years, I've probably had 5 cooked breakfasts since then. Like, I read that book, I was like, okay, fruit for breakfast. I haven't been sick since. I haven't had an actual sick day in 23 years. I started moving towards vegetarianism. That took a little bit of time. And then to veganism. It was about a 4.5-year transition from basically eating everything and anything and drinking and partying all the time to being a high raw vegan. And that's now just over 18 and a half years ago that I went high raw vegan. And at that time, I wanted to be a vegan chef, but I couldn't find a vegan chefing school. And at this point, I was living in Vancouver, Canada. And so I went into my second passion, which was nutrition. And, that whole 4-year period, I kept on reading books on nutrition, and I was, testing out recipes and making stuff like that. But again, I couldn't find real vegan chefing school that didn't basically require you to also do some meat stuff. And I just wasn't willing to do that. So my secondary was to go to holistic nutrition school. So I did that in Vancouver, Canada. It was a full-time 1-year course, which was really holistically based, and it went into a lot of different diets. And at that time I was high raw vegan, basically eating what people say raw till 4. And halfway through that schooling, I went to a vegan health festival called Taste of Health. And there was 3 raw speakers. Now, at that point, I'd already kind of had an introduction to raw food, and I was interested in it. And basically everything I was learning was pointing me towards more raw food, more raw food. I'd even read a book by David Wolfe and another bit of one by Gabriel Cousins, but I didn't quite understand how to put the diet together in a way that felt good and I really enjoyed. So that's what kind of kept me high raw. But at the Taste of Health Festival, I met Dr. Doug Graham, who's now a great friend. And I feel blessed to say we've written books together. But at that time, he was like a 28-year raw vegan. And he just had what I was looking for. Like, he was shining with health. He was talking about athletics. I used to have a history of doing a lot of like magic mushrooms and sitting out in nature and looking at auras of plants and stuff like that. But Doug Graham was the first person that I saw an aura around when I wasn't under the influence of magic mushrooms. And I was like, this guy has something going on. Like, he's exuding something that either I am looking for, or there is something that he is just here in my path to like wake me up to. And so I went to every talk he did. I went and talked with him personally after and told him my goals. And he was just like sitting down to a huge, huge platter of blueberries, like pounds and pounds of blueberries, just shoveling them in his mouth. And he basically just supported me. He just told me really what I needed to hear in that moment. And my whole paradigm shifted. Before that, really, like, my entire interest in nutrition was just for skateboarding. Like, I was in school, but I had zero intention of really using it as a profession or anything like that. I just wanted to skateboard more and heal faster. But that next day I went 100% raw, and my heart center completely burst open. And I felt so connected to everyone and everything around me that I was like, this is why I'm here. You know, like, I love skateboarding. I'm always going to be doing it. But this is why I'm here, to open people up to this reality, because it can have such a profound impact on you and on the planet, on the animals. And so I remember just walking down the street crying and feeling so blessed. And I went back to that festival and I met Doug again, went to every single lecture. And it's wild because it was 3 years after that until I really hung out with another raw foodist, besides one little teeny bit. And I mostly just followed Doug Graham online, and we talked and I read more and researched more. But to kind of wrap up the rest, it took about 4.5 years of me applying the diet, you know, falling off a few times, having a few really, really tough moments, which if you want, we can go more into, to come to a place where I felt really comfortable and confident that I could be a guide for others in doing that. And so I started up my website, The Raw Advantage, and now that's like almost 13 years ago. And that's all I do full time now. So, you know, for 13 years, that's all I've done: consultations, retreats. I've written, I think, 9 books. One of them I co-authored with Doug Graham, spoke at a lot of festivals, you know, done lots of retreats, have a free app, all that fun stuff. I just do this full time now, and I feel really blessed by it.
Wow, such a beautiful story. So you were talking about the low moments that you went through during the, you know, transition.
Yeah.
We would love to know about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, you know, I had a fairly decent transition going from like eating everything into vegetarian, and then into vegan, high raw vegan, and then raw vegan. And when I first went raw vegan, all I said was that I would do 30 days. I was like, I'm just going to do 30 days, you know? And I remember halfway through that, I had like a handful of granola, and I was like, oh, that was silly, but I don't need that. But at the end of the 30 days, I was like, wow, I feel amazing. Like, I felt like I was on rocket fuel. I knew this was the way I wanted to go. But I said, okay, I can have whatever I want. So I went to all you can eat East Indian buffet, because that was one of my favorite things in the world. I went to Subway and had a vegan sub. And I went to a vegan pizza place and had some vegan pizza. And I felt crappy. That was like 3 days of basically eating raw till dinner, but having those dinners. And I was like, okay, I'm back on. So I got back onto raw food. And then it wasn't until like 6 months later, I was flying on raw food. I was more active than I'd ever been. Like, I was biking for a couple hours a day, skateboarding nonstop. But all the while, I was steadily losing weight. You know, I think I was at about 175, 180 before I went raw vegan. And about 6 months in, I got down to like 155. You know, I was very light. And I was feeling really good. But what I didn't understand at that point was the concept of caloric density. I just, for some reason, didn't, whether I understood it or just didn't apply it, I don't know. But I didn't really get that, meals of bananas are vastly different in terms of your caloric intake than meals of strawberries and stuff like that. And I was mostly eating the juicier fruits and really, really simple meals, just really simple meals. My intro into raw food was a completely hygienic approach. So meaning, no onions, no garlic. I didn't make fancy recipes. It was really just eating fruits and greens and very small amounts of nuts and seeds. And I felt amazing. I felt like I was on fire. But again, I was steadily losing weight. And I started slowly getting to a point where all of a sudden I was experiencing joint aches and pains again, which I had before I went raw. And I also had severe candida before I went raw, but that cleared up. But I just wasn't quite feeling 100%. I was still feeling amazing, but I was feeling too light and just not quite the same energy. It was right around this time that a bunch of my friends, they came to Vancouver and they're like, hey, we're going to go to California. Like, do you want to come? And they were all my friends from Edmonton, Alberta, which are amazing, beautiful people, but they're also the people that I learned how to party with, that I basically was at my highest party, highest junk food eating with, And so we went to California for 2 weeks. I had a $2 a day budget because I had like no money. And I remember because of that, I figured, okay, well, I'll bring like a huge, huge box of baby bananas and bring them with me so that I have at least some food that is reliable, When we got to the border, though, the border said you can't bring those into the States. And so I tried my best to eat as many as I could. And I forced back like probably like 25, 30 of the bananas. And truthfully, I don't like them to this day. I used to love those. I don't like them to this day because I forced it so much 18 years ago. Oh, wow. But they took those away from me and I had a $2 a day budget, which basically ended up, I'd go to a farmer's market and ask if they had any like rotten stuff that they'd sell for cheap because I couldn't afford anything like the strawberries that were $4 a pound. And that's not going to sustain me. So the long story short there was the first week of that trip, I was basically trying to survive off of raisins and water. And it didn't feel good. All my friends were drinking, smoking, going to McDonald's, laughing, having a great time, skateboarding incredibly well, while my knees were hurting. I had no energy. I was in my head again and starting to feel depressed because I felt like I'm doing this for skateboarding, at least in part still, and I can't even do it, And I remember I was still, though, of the mind, like they asked me, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? I'm like, well, it feels so amazing. It makes so much sense. Like, I'm a raw vegan for life. I remember saying to them, actually, like, because, they give you the hypothetical kind of question, like, but what if you're on an island and all there was this, like there's just animal products on the island, And I told him I'd rather just fast, I wouldn't eat anything. I'd rather like fast for 60 days instead of eat anything else, And I really believed that in my heart. But at the end of that week, when I was starving and starting to get manic and depressed because I wasn't able to skateboard and I was just really questioning my identity. And, there's so many things going on internally. There was one night that they were all drinking and partying at the fire. And I was like, I just got to go for a walk. And I went for a walk. And I came across a convenience store and I went in there like sweating because I was so nervous and feeling so weird. And I bought a Snickers bar and I hadn't had a chocolate bar for, I don't even know, it had definitely been years. And I ate that Snickers bar and immediately just felt a flood of guilt. Like I just felt like a complete failure. I felt like a hypocrite. I felt like a liar. And I felt worthless. I literally like hated myself. And at that point, I was like, screw it, who cares? And I went to the first fast food restaurant and I ordered a bacon chili cheeseburger. And I sat on the curb by myself and ate that. And I hadn't had meat at that time for about 3.5, 4 years. And when I had that, then I really loathed myself. I was just seething in hate for myself. And I never told anyone that for years. I kept it completely secret. And it definitely affected me on some level for years, because I was so ashamed I wouldn't even bring it up. And I went back to the camp, though, and I just pretended nothing happened. And the rest of the trip kind of went by. I didn't really skateboard well. I felt crappy. I was depressed. There was another moment along that trip where we stopped at a Taco Bell. which was my old favorite at the previous time. And I ordered like bean burritos in front of everyone. I'm like, I'm just going to order bean burritos. And I think that was my way of like subconsciously relieving some of the guilt, because they saw me doing something that I kept in private. And I even switched out some of those bean burritos for some meat tacos with one of my friends. I'm like, hey, I'll trade you one of my bean burritos for a meat taco. Wow. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah, I just want one. And so I had a couple of those. And again, I think that was me trying to release some guilt without admitting what I did in the past. But again, it really didn't feel good. It went against everything I believed, and I felt really lost. And we got back to Vancouver. They left. I felt really disillusioned, and I fasted for 3 days and then got back on the track and left that behind, and it took months. It took another like 16 months before I fell off the wagon again, which was a totally different scenario. I fractured my back skateboarding. And I thought that I wouldn't ever be able to skateboard again, and my back hurt. And I actually ordered a steak and cheese pizza to myself on a street corner. And I ate it like, I didn't order it to a house. I ordered it to a street corner because I didn't want anyone to see me. And I ate that. And again, I hated myself. I felt completely like a hypocrite and a liar. And that one I never told anyone for years and years and years either. But eventually I got through it. I mean, after that, it took a couple of years before I made a decision. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction in a place from depression, I made a decision to try some cooked foods, and it didn't really give me what I was looking for. And then the last time that I really like at a pinnacle point made that decision was in my first year of my website, which actually I wrote a whole blog about. And for me, that was actually the turning point of really more clearly understanding the negative attraction food can have, and how we can be drawn to it when we see it as something that is bad and wrong, and we're resisting it and thinking like that's just something that if I do, I'm a bad person. Kind of separating the emotional judgment from it and just seeing it as a choice with some certain consequences and realities from it. Yeah, I've had some serious ups and downs with that in my first 5 years of raw food. And although they weren't frequent, it was like 3 major times over like a 5.5-year period, the energy that those choices had on me, like the effect they had on me, was very profound, because again, I felt so guilty about it. I thought it was like defined me as a person and made me a worse person for making those choices. And I was really, really hard on myself. And what I've learned from that is, like, our choices affect us, on different lanes, right? Like from the physical, the mental, the emotional. And I think that, the less hard we can be on ourselves, the better it is, because I wouldn't wish what I felt for myself on anyone. It was definitely traumatic, and I learned a lot from it, but I would hope to tell others to be a lot easier on themselves.
Oh my God. It's like you were doing so amazing, and then so hard on yourself for like a small choice that you made. I think it shows a lot of like strength of character, and like a deep desire to be something very beautiful. And I think it's so amazing that it also arrives for a compassion for animals, which probably like a lot of raw vegans get. It's there's no judgment in it, but a lot of raw vegans also do it for themselves, and it's beautiful. Like, when we do good for ourselves, it's amazing. Like, why not? But it's like beautiful journey into the into raw food. So you were mentioning about meeting so many different people who were on different diets, and then you mentioned like how it opened your heart. And you were doing magic mushrooms. How would you say, like, it affected your, as I also mentioned in the beginning, like when I was talking with you, there was so much compassion and love that was coming through. I felt like really nice and very like beautifully received. So how do you think like raw vegan food affected that area of your life? Like you said, you could see this person's aura, and like just like opening up your heart center. I would love to know about that, and probably the viewers also would like to know, because I think you can shed light on would you call it spiritual, because you're not using the word spiritual and using more like emotional. So I would also like to understand why is it that, and just like your experience also.
That's a great question. to me, I think that raw food is a vortex of change. It really opens us up on many, many levels, and it's an unpeeling of the onion. It removes filters or layers from our perception, and I think we have many, many things that to some degree numb us. That can be numbing us emotionally or socially or spiritually, or create a bit of a dividing point, and I think that it's very, very common for a lot of people who get into raw food to get more in touch with spirituality and more in touch with themselves and their emotional self. And for some, that can be very jarring. That can be, almost frightening, because all of a sudden you feel things more intensely. And that, again, that can be emotional or that can be spiritual connection. And again, I don't think that it by any means makes one more spiritual or anything, but I think it definitely can bring one into closer contact with their spiritual self and those spiritual energies and that connection, So I think for me, in that first day of going raw, it wasn't necessarily just raw food, but I think it was that I really met my purpose. I met what one could say is destiny or whatever it may be. And just feeling that deeper connection really just blasted my heart center open, because I was like, okay, this is me meeting my purpose, but I do definitely see, and I have felt myself, that, a raw food diet, I think it just cleanses the lenses of perception and bring higher states of reality and brings you more deep connection to self. You know what I mean? If you're more deeply connected to self, then you're more deeply connected to everyone and everything, right? So it's just kind of a cleansing of those dirty lenses that we may have built up around us for any number of reasons.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. For me as well, I think I was already on a spiritual path, but just getting on the raw food helped me ease into my spiritual path so much, allowed me to open my heart center and also be open to so many finer energies, like clarity of mind and meditation and manifestation, so much deeper into manifestation. And just I think getting closer and closer to the purpose of life.
Yes.
So yeah, I do agree, of course, but I would, since you're doing Kundalini yoga and you also mentioned about magic mushrooms, so
Yes.
would you like to share your experience on plant medicines, and if you have had experience on being on a raw vegan diet, and just in general, what do you think, is there a space, a raw vegan world, or for somebody who is on a raw vegan diet?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think anything to do with, dietary choice or spirituality or plant medicines, any of these things is a highly personal choice. And I don't think that any of them are necessarily for everyone, but they are something that anyone can utilize as a tool for their own growth, and some people may be ready for plant medicine or for raw food, and other people, they may not want to. They may want those layers that we kind of mentioned, as a bit of a buffer to reality. And I think it's just, again, it's a personal journey. For me, I always, since my youth, I was actually interested in spirituality and plant medicines long before I found yoga or raw foods. When I was in my 16, 16, I remember reading the Celestian Prophecies, and then I remember reading all the books by Carlos Castaneda and the Journeys of Don Juan. And, was really interested in those. I mean, I got into, of course, drinking, but at the same time, I was into mushrooms, and then I started seeking different hallucinogenic kind of plants and different kind of journey plants and stuff like that. I remember I was in Vancouver going to head shops, looking for the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which there was a shop that had it, but it was never in stock, and I never got to try it. But that's, if people don't know, that's what the Mongolian berserkers used, because they were seen as fearless in battle. But it was also a mushroom that has a really, really rich history. It's the one that Mario uses to get the white dots on the red caps. And anyways, I was always seeking that. I remember I found salvia, which people talked about being really intense, and I tried it, but it never did anything for me. I never, I don't know if I didn't do it right, but I tried it a few times and never did anything for me. I stayed away from chemicals, I never did anything. I was offered cocaine, and I was offered speed, and I was offered acid, and I was offered a whole bunch of other things, but I was never drawn to those. I was drawn to plant-based medicines, and And part of me wanted to get lost, like in those earlier years. Like I genuinely just wanted to lose my point of perception. I wanted to just merge into everything and nothing. That was like something that I for some reason had a deep calling to in my younger years before I even got into, like I said, health. And I remember one point I had like 2 ounces of mushrooms and I biked across Canada. I did a bike ride from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan into BC, and was going towards BC. I only made it to Alberta, but I had those and I was, taking them by myself. And that's where I mostly took them. Like I'd been introduced to them by friends in a party situation, but I ended up instead using them more to go into myself and be in nature. And I'd just go by a riverbank or I'd go amongst trees and take some and just relax and like look at nature. And like I said, I'd see auras around trees and plants and animals. And I just really liked that. But when I kind of got more and more into raw food and health, and especially hygiene, I let all of that go. I kind of saw it in a different light as not really being, one, necessary, or two, being healthful, and at that point too, I felt like I had shifted my perception to that kind of unity consciousness enough that I felt like I don't really need to go back there. It's not something that I feel called to anymore, and I completely let it go. And it wasn't that I labeled it bad. I still honored those experiences and I felt very blessed by them. So yeah, when I first really got into raw vegan and was really interested in the hygienic path, I kind of let go of the plant medicines as it just didn't really resonate with my new belief system, having toxic qualities to it. And also I just really felt like I had already opened those doors. I didn't really need that constant reminder. I kind of saw it as a tool to a different perception, and I had really, really enjoyed it. I had really felt the value of it, but I didn't really feel like it was an important part of my life anymore. And I just really wanted to be grounded in, the regular perception of living, which had already created shifts in me anyways. Like I already felt different shifts from the raw food. So I was like, all right, this is amazing. I'm very comfortable with this frame of reference that I'm in. I don't feel a need to shift it anymore, and I felt like that for a long period of time. I think it was about almost 7 or 8 years that I didn't touch any hallucinogenics or anything like that. I had, I think maybe a couple experiences with alcohol from there, but I basically kind of put that on the back burner as well. I did use marijuana on occasions, but mostly as a painkiller. Like I'd rather have that than pills and other stuff like that. So like I've broken many bones. Like truthfully, when I mentioned that that back injury, I fractured my back 12, 13 years ago. I didn't know I fractured it. I was just really, really hurt. And to heal myself in that situation, I smoked weed and I ate fruit. I just chilled out, and just like relaxed and breathed, because I always felt that as a sacrament, as a medicine, it allowed me to really become much more deep within my body and really connect with deep, deep breath and meditation and going to the source of the pain and just breathing into it, and so I utilized that as a tool or as a plant medicine, I suppose, in my past, but I didn't really feel a connection to the psychogenics for a long period of time. That was actually until I started doing retreats out in Costa Rica. And I was doing raw food retreats. And at the same center that I was doing retreats, they had shamanistic retreats. They'd have shaman come and do plant medicine ceremonies. And I wasn't drawn to it. And in fact, I was having some conversations with the owner, just kind of saying like, I've already visited that. I don't really feel a need to wake it up anymore. But if I was in the right circumstance or it just really felt right, then I maybe would be open to it. And I remember meeting the one shaman who came in and was like, oh, like, I like your energy. Like, I would love for you to be of service in the ceremony and just be a ground for people who are in their journeys. And I was like, yeah, sure. That's great. And so I did that once. And then the next time they were like, well, if you'd like to partake, just let me know. And I talked with them more and it just felt really connected. And I was like, all right, well, I'll give this a try, because I'd seen some people do it. And that one was ayahuasca. And so I went in, but it was pretty cool, because my first experience with ayahuasca, which is now, I guess, about a decade ago, was with a shaman from New York, but he was from a line of shamans. And he made his own kind of concoction. So he had something that he called a chocolate mauze, which was a mixture of mushrooms, cacao, and ayahuasca, and which was really neat. There was no purging involved or anything like that. And I felt like I was in a very safe place because he was there, my friends were there, which I think is a really important part of all those kinds of plant medicines, is to be in a comfortable place, not only like physically, but also like mentally, emotionally. Because if you're in a really like off kilter place, it can actually deepen that effect and bring you deeper into those realities, which maybe that's what you need, right? But I'd rather have a good experience, you know, a lighter kind of experience. So anyways, I felt really supported in that. And it was kind of neat because I remember going into it, and the first thing that kicked in was mushrooms, which I now would refer to as the crazy uncle, you know, and ayahuasca is often the grandmother. And, you know, the crazy uncle's like, hey, what's up? And I'm yawning. I'm like, oh, you know, yawning. I'm like, hey. And he's like, hey, I got someone with me, meet grandmother, you know? And so he brought in grandmother, and I felt very, very much called to just lay down, wrap up into a cocoon and go within, you know, and it was a very, very potent experience, a very internally visual experience. And I don't want to go into everything that I saw around me because that's other people's stuff. But for myself, I envisioned myself like in my inner eye as a temple. And I was just like this giant stone temple in the middle of a forest. And ayahuasca came in as a vine and started creeping into the temple and surrounding all the walls and crawling through. And I was like, my temple is yours to play with. Come, you know, like come in, like I seek your wisdom, you know. And so she came in and she went around, and then she started tightening and walls started cracking. And I was like, hey, like that's too much, you know, like, you know, please relax. And she did. And it was a very potent kind of death experience, you know, where I just like, I felt like, again, a deep connection to everything. I felt so much gratitude, and it made life feel simple. You know, it was just like, wow, life is incredibly, incredibly simple. It's just remembering, you know, and letting go and connecting and, you know, really focusing on what we're blessed with and spreading that, you know. And so it was a very powerful experience, probably like most experiences, almost impossible to fully explain, you know, but it was very, very potent, very personal, and also expansive, you know, and universal. And I felt blessed by it. And I remember like feeling like everyone's got to do this. But then like 2 days later, I was like, maybe not everyone, you know. But,
yeah, I get it.
You know, but yeah, that was really interesting. And since then, I didn't completely get myself lost, and I felt like a desire to kind of get back into that again at certain different points. And I think I've been on like five ayahuasca journeys since then.
Wow.
And some of them more potent, some of them, and the rest of them actually were, you know, done with the classic kind of the drink instead of a chocolate mauze, and with some different shamans and totally different vibe depending upon the shaman. You know, like I went with one that was definitely took you into the dark night of the soul and like really, really brought you deep, and was like singing traditional music the whole time, and like was more visual, open-eyed. And I saw some beings that looked like praying mantises, like, you know, had heads of praying mantises. And I remember talking to the shaman and talking to other friends who journeyed before, who said that is like a human insectoid crossbreed that is on the planet. And I mean, I can't attest to that, but I know what I saw, and I saw it in 2 different journeys, and they all say that they see that as well. And when your perception is shifted, you can see things that are kind of between dimensions, you know. And anyways, so that's kind of interesting stuff. People probably think some people think I'm crazy saying that, but hey, that's what I experienced. That's what I saw.
It's okay. Amazing.
Yeah. And then I experimented with sassafras, which is essentially the plant version of ecstasy, but it's just a plant and doesn't really have the harsh come off or the chemical component of ecstasy, which is extremely heart opening. That was during another plant-based retreat where they had, you know, different plant medicines, and then also peyote a few times as well, which was a friend of mine's. He really works with the plant. So that one was what is often referred to as the grandfather. So you've got the grandmother, the grandfather, and the crazy uncle.
Yeah.
And that was a crazy, wild experience too. Incredible heat, incredible opening, and kind of like, whereas the grandmother's kind of like a little bit more strict and like you can't control it. It's like you're going down to the dark night of the soul and to an ego death. Grandfather's like, oh, hey, check this out. Like, go ahead. Like, like, here's the steering wheel, do what you want with it. And it's amazing because like I found that I could just shut my eyes and go into the deepest meditation I've ever been in, with the most crazy fractals and like, eye-opening experience, to all of a sudden like snap out of it and just be in like reality, crystal clear, and like turn it on and off, yeah, it's been a number of years now that since I've done plant medicines. I think probably about, I guess it's been about 5 years now, 5 or 6 years, I don't know, something like that. And I don't feel I'm at the same place again. I don't really feel a draw to them. But every single time I've done any of them, really, and that's the reason why I don't feel a draw, is it doesn't matter if it was the uncle, the grandmother, or grandfather. Every single time I'm brought to the same message, like every single time. It's just like, you're connected to everything, like you are divine, life is sacred. Share the blessings and gifts, and like, just love, like that's genuinely what I'm always brought to every single time. And I think sometimes we can use reminders, and that's where I think those can be a place, but I've also seen them as traps, and as the alcohol is a way to escape sometimes. So that's my experience with plant medicines. And I think that they can be incredibly powerful in awakening what is already there in people. But if someone doesn't want it, thinks it's bad, or is in a unbalanced mind state, then it can also be detrimental and can bring people to a place of being defragged, and that can be intense too.
Yeah. I completely agree with you on everything that you shared. And thank you so much for sharing this part. Because actually I went through the same process of like feeling, especially when I read 80-10-10, like how, mushrooms probably are toxic and all of those ideas that you were talking about. But the most beautiful part of like plant medicines, I feel, is which comes a lot in the raw vegan picture, is before doing the plant medicine, especially like ayahuasca, you're supposed to, they say you're supposed to prepare yourself with a certain diet. And then we talk about eating raw food and like, cutting out on meat and all of those things. And I would like to like, ask from your experience what you've had. Because what I like in my experience, if you are on a raw vegan diet and then you take the medicine, the experience is so much more easier and so much more like you don't have the purging so much, and you just like, it's just like straight into it, instead of people who are on like, diets that are not very healthy, like, in your and mine opinion. And what happens is that it makes the experience tougher. And then the plant medicine is also like has difficulty in like, basically cleaning you up. So and this kind of also suggests like in a lot of ways how like, what is the correct human diet, which is expressed in 80-10-10 as well. So because you've had more experiences, and I wouldn't say I've had so many, because you said that you were helping as well, and then you had 5 trips. What would you like? What was your experience around it? And I'm sure people around you probably were not on a raw vegan diet for a long time.
Yeah, no, some were, because in some cases I was at a raw food center, and in other cases I was just at a ayahuasca center. But I mean, first, what I'd start off with is, I mean, my backbone is hygiene and natural hygiene. I think it has so much beauty to it, and it is so awesome. But I have come to a place where I don't see things as black and white at all anymore. You know what I mean? There's only a short period of time that I did, and labeling things that are hygienic as good and things that aren't hygienic as bad. I think that life has a lot more variance and gray to it. And, when we make things good, bad, right, wrong, and see things in those dualistic kind of polarities, it just causes headbutting and stress, really, especially if you end up wavering from one to the other, which I very clearly experienced in my past, where I just labeled certain experiences as good and some as bad, So, while the magic mushrooms do have some toxic qualities that bring upon the hallucinogenic effects, the net of that for me was positive, and I don't see it as like as just static, like there's not that. I think everything has a kind of a check and balance, and
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's just choice and experience, right? It's not really like, again, a static kind of good or bad thing. Yeah, with the different journeys, the one thing I would say is when I ate light before and didn't eat close to the ceremony, super, super smooth and great. On one of my journeys, for some reason, a couple hours before, I ate like a huge meal of tomatoes, like just a couple hours before the ceremony. And I vomited tons of tomatoes, like all over the place. Like, that was not good. So definitely, like either fasting or not eating for like 6 to 8 hours before the ceremony is what I would prefer myself. And definitely I found whether it's the plant medicines or whether it's injury or whether it's, whatever it is, I find that I bounce back quicker and more smoothly than, how I would have otherwise, or other people that have a different dietary approach. I mean, I can't comment on how deep you go, but I definitely do know people who have been doing plant medicines for a long period of time and who have said that they feel, much more connection and just like a deeper practice when they are eating a very light diet. And like you said, it is traditional to clean up the diet, and it doesn't matter if it's for plant medicines or if it's just for a spiritual practice, like a clean, light diet really facilitates that and makes things, just much more intensive.
Yeah. And what would you say, like, how should people be eating? How could, I would say, I don't like to use the word should, but how could people be eating after the ceremony? Like, because before the ceremonies, you're talking about, it should be light, don't eat, and probably do fasting, which they suggest as well. But if after taking the plant medicine, should they be rebuilding, or what would they be like, working on?
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself an authority on that by any means, but for myself, I just ate what I was drawn to. And I mean, really, I eat fruits and vegetables, so whatever I was drawn to afterwards. And sometimes there's really juicy foods to hydrate, because it can be a dehydrating experience. It's all the plant medicines really draw water from you, so especially peyote, it's like a intense heat that it loves fruit. So even when I was on those, I would be eating like juicy watermelon and mangoes and stuff like that, and just like reveling in it, just like, oh my God, this is amazing, and so for me, it's always just been generally just juicy fruits after, and then by the night after, usually I'm drawn to something more dense, like a salad or curry or something like that.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay. And so there are two aspects to, like, when we talk about food, it's a lot about healing, like healing the body. And there's like, because I think healing happens automatically in the body. And what a diet does is that it just provides that environment where, you're not interfering with the healing. And in my experience, I think health is a lot about, consciousness, because everything is coming from there. And when we take plant medicines, I think maybe there's some shift that you need to do in yourself that can, or like, that you get certain kind of energy or like a spiritual connection, something that happens that can help and accelerate the healing for some people if they're struggling. What would you say on that? Like, like the spiritual aspect of healing and the consciousness, because since you're, practicing Kundalini yoga, and then as I heard in the interview as well, like since the time we're talking, that there's so much that you're talking about emotions and, spirituality and on those
absolutely
lines.
Well, it's definitely all connected, like, I mean, I've met people, for example, who they do all the right things, physically with food, but in an emotional sense or in a spiritual sense, they're completely disconnected and they don't have the best results. I know people who have deeply enrooted belief systems that they're either not enough or that they can't get enough, and they never seem to exhibit the qualities of being whole and of being balanced. I can say on my own path, I've always felt like I'm a freight train, like nothing can stop me. Like I feel powerful, and I try my best to own that, and I mean, we all have physical limits, we all have emotional limits, and, our spiritual connection is only as deep as we're willing to go. But, if we feel strong in those connections and we practice, different means of, being more connected or of strengthening that connection, it's only going to have positive outcomes, So I definitely do believe in the power of belief, in the power of thought, in the power of practice, and, that all of it is a constant evolution. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's just about continually practicing, and all of those things have a big impact. Kind of the same as like, if you're going into a journey and, your thought patterns are really erratic and you're focusing on fears, well, you're probably going to magnify those, and I think whatever you think about to a large degree does come about, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's 100%, but it definitely has a powerful impact on the outcome. So I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for. Is there a different aspect of it you're looking for?
No, I completely get it. If you want to go deeper in it, it's like, it's your wish. But I like, this is what, of course, like just wanting to bring about the point, from you as well, that how it's so important to like cater to your beliefs and your inner self-worth, as you mentioned, when it comes to health, because it's just not food. It's, food is a facilitator for it, for our, like, for our journey on this planet and what we've come for. So it's not about eating the right kind of food. It's about like going on that journey of evolution and finding out that food is an enabler for your journey on the planet. And, realizing that health comes from, being in a space of like this self-love and like, feeling that, you're powerful and then you are it. And then you're, and then basically changing all those beliefs that are kind of like in the path of you being healthy, because from those beliefs comes, bad health. And if you change the beliefs, you can move into higher health. So I think this is what I, I think, and you kind of like, put this, different way from your experience. And if you have something more to share, I'd love to know, on this point.
I totally agree. And I mean, I just think that either your beliefs are supporting you and your highest vision and your goals, or they're a detriment and they're trying to keep you from them, right? And we can have various views, and some of them can be conscious and some of them can be unconscious. But the more we bring them into the conscious, the more we stand to actually create choice, instead of it just being something that is an old framework, an old view or old paradigm that is holding us back. We can ask ourselves questions of, like, why do we think this way? And is it true? Does it support my highest goals? And if not, how can I create shifts in that? Like, it's kind of an unwinding process, but I think the more we bring kind of conscious thought to it and reflect on it, and then decide to try a new perspective. Sometimes that's all it is to just being like, all right, I'm going to try this on, and try and own this, try and sit in this and see how that affects me, see what that brings me. Can be a really, really powerful choice, because, it is just really astounding how big of a difference it really makes, your belief system around what you're doing, and your own belief in yourself and your own belief in how everything is connected, because if you don't feel that connection, it's going to resonate very, very differently, than if you really have that deep belief or knowing of connection of everything. So, I don't think it can be understated.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So what are the practices that you follow? Because I see that you mentioned, like you've been able to create this powerful self and everything that you do around your, purpose, and you've found your purpose, and, you're full-time doing something that you love. And probably this is something that people look for so much in life. And I think we need to really spread it, because abundance is about health as well as about like so many aspects of life. And I think raw food really puts you in your purpose because you're vibrating high with it. So like, what are the practices that you do, and how do you cultivate it more and more in your life?
I feel really blessed because I've just been guided by passion. I think that's kind of something that has really led me. And it started with skateboarding, and skateboarding still to this day. I've been skateboarding, I think, like 38 years or something like that. Like I love it. It's like one of my favorite things in the world to do. And it led me along a journey that health became really, really necessary, which brought me more and more into spirituality and into everything that I do now. And, it woke in me the passion for health and health creation and yoga and just fitness and movement. And I continue to just grow in the things that I feel really, really drawn to. And I think, to me, that is just a huge message, right? Is that the things that we feel the most like a child doing, the things that we feel like the most wonder and excitement doing, the things that we feel like time dissolves and we're just like immersed in it. And that doesn't have to be a physical activity. That can be like, when I'm consulting people and I'm helping them, like time dissolves and I'm just enjoying, I love it, like when I'm skateboarding, same thing. When I'm doing yoga, same thing, when you're having those meaningful conversations with people, same kind of thing, and just listening to those things and seeing how we can be of service. I think at the center of all of it is, like how can we be in service either to ourselves or to others? Because it doesn't matter if you're doing it, in service for yourself or if you're service to others, it lightens the whole world, because one, it shares with others that, you are important and your needs are very important. And if you can make time and be completely at home in giving to yourself, well, that gives permission to everyone else to do the same. And when you feel abundance in something and something that can help others and you're called into service, doing so, it also helps pass that same energy that others can be of service to anyone where they're coming from, that wellspring of abundance that they have. And that abundance is different in everyone. Someone might be abundant in compassion, or it might be love, or it might be knowledge, or it might be money, but any of those things can help make the world go around if we all share from our place of abundance. And that's just where I've tried to come from, is the things I'm abundant in, and at the same time not feel bad about giving to myself as much as I need, to replenish that well.
Of course. Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to replenish yourself in the process, because if your cup is full, then only you can offer. So I think it starts definitely from there, and you become an example for people, because I think that's if you can vibrate in the highest frequency, that's like enough. And if you can, like, because anyway, it's like, spreading out. And if there comes a point where someone's seeking for support and help, and then you go do it, it's like, just like a added on, thing that happens around there. Awesome. Really beautiful. So, that is very, very beautiful. I think I did not really know that this is what I would get out of this podcast. I had no idea. It's like I was just like looking, okay, let's see what comes out. And it's definitely, like, I would say, divine timing, how things are happening, with this conversation. So what is it that you eat now? Because you were talking about 80-10-10, and then, what is your day like? And also I'd like to know, because you talked about weight loss, how is it that you're maintaining such a beautiful body?
Thanks. Well, I mean, I would say, like that I eat an 80-10-10 low fat raw vegan diet. And I think, a lot of people don't actually know and recognize that, like, 80-10-10 isn't specifically raw vegan. Like Dr. Graham, he coined the phrase, and specifically he lives and teaches an 80-10-10 RV, raw vegan approach, which I do. But I mean, you can be eating 80-10-10 on Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, you're back.
Someone's trying to call me. I'll make sure that I turn off my ringer. Apologies for that. So you can be doing a 80-10-10 on any kind of dietary approach. But so I predominantly eat fruits for my calories. I eat loads of vegetables, and I'm not strictly hygienic, although that is my backbone. So I'd probably say, like, anywhere from 50 to 90% of what I eat is hygienic and just basically fruit and greens. But I do also enjoy, like some green onions and sometimes garlic and ginger, and I like spices. I make a lot of curries. What else do I mean? I'm known as a raw vegan chef, and I make, like raw pizzas and stuff like that. But a lot of times I like it to be pretty darn simple. I do include mushrooms in my diet. Sometimes I include sprouts, lentil sprouts, mung bean sprouts, alfalfa, broccoli, any of those guys. I do include some seaweeds. So specifically like 80-10-10 hygienic usually doesn't really actually include, say, seaweeds or not even very much sprouts. But I do find benefit for those in my diet. So that's one where I go a little bit outside of that. The only supplements I take is the vitamin B12. And if I'm in a long winter without going into the tropics, I might take some vitamin D. But I do also eat a lot of mushrooms, and I sun the mushrooms, which does actually have vitamin D in it as well. But yeah, those are the only ones I don't want to, risk going low in, and they aren't really food related typically, except for in the mushrooms for the vitamin D. But that's what I eat mostly. I mean, I usually eat 2 big meals a day, sometimes 3. Usually one of those meals is a giant fruit meal. It might be like 18 bananas. And then my dinner might be like a 4 or 5 pound curry,
Wow.
And it hasn't always been that way. For the first decade on a raw food diet, I ate 3 meals. For my first 5 years on the diet, I ate 3 to 4 meals. But progressively over the years, my meal size has gone up and my frequency has gone down. And I just really feel balanced that way, because I wake up, I get some movement, I have some water. And then when I'm hungry, which usually isn't for 3 or 4 hours after I wake up, I have a giant meal, and then I'm good for 6 hours, and then I have another meal, and then I'm done.
Awesome. Okay, beautiful, very beautiful. So, and then did you also do some cleanses when you were, or do you do it now as well? What about fasting and cleanses?
Before I went raw, I did a number of fasts, like in that first 4.5 years of steadily improving my diet and going more and more towards raw food and eventually high raw vegan. It was in that period of time that I did the largest number of fasts. I think I probably did like 5 or 6 fasts, ranging from like 1 day up to 7 days. And then when I went raw vegan, I did another couple 7-day fasts, and then a 11-day fast is the last one that I did, which I actually have fully documented. It was at the Farm of Life in Costa Rica, the retreat center that I've mentioned a couple times. And I did that under their loose supervision at their center. And I think I did like 4 or 5 video blogs and full blog posts going into every single aspect of all of that. Otherwise, I've also done periods of time where I've done just mono fruits. So like I've done, I think 11 or 12 days is the longest I've done just on one fruit. And often it'd be like melons or bananas. And sometimes just very simplistic eating. So like, just mono meals, each meal. And then probably about 7 years ago, myself and my good friend Ashley, we came up with a cleanse that is called the Rainbow Island Cleanse, which is a kind of a combination of a body, mind, spirit cleanse that incorporates Kundalini yoga and mono meals and very simplistic eating that correspond with each chakra. So a 7-day cleanse going through each of the different chakras with different colored foods that correspond with each one, with corresponding yoga movements and breath work and affirmations and affirmations that go into each energy more deeply. So you can like really embody each energy and, come through it. And I've done that a couple times a year, over the last 8 years, so, but for the absolute most part, what I've really come to now is I really aim to just live in a way where I don't really require doing any kind of protocols or cleanses. And if I do feel like I'm just a little bit kind of bunged up or that I could streamline, then I just eat simple, This January, for example, I just ate fruit and greens for the whole month. I didn't have any fats. I didn't have really any recipes besides a couple smoothies. And that just streamlined it. Because again, kind of like you said, like I definitely come from that belief system as well, that the body is the healer and all we really need to do is get out of the way and provide it the tools it requires. And really at the end of the day, this lifestyle, it just lends to having more vitality for the body to do deeper healing work itself. And so the more we can simplify, the more energy that goes into that healing. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful, very beautiful. So what about enemas? What is your point of view on that? Like, have you tried and should like, like for the cleanses?
I don't really. Oh, and did you say enemas?
Enema, yeah. Yes.
Oh, I can't. I thought you said animals, and I was like, I don't know what you mean. It's like I love them. I love animals. I haven't tried them on cleanses. that would be. It just took a strange turn.
Oh my God. Yes.
I've never really been drawn to enemas or colonics or anything, and it's something that I've been aware of since before I even went raw. You know, I'm friends with a number of colon hydrotherapists, and I've researched and stuff like that, but it's never been something that I've been drawn to. And I think that, you know, I've also in my consultation practice, I've had people who have, you know, long-term ill effects from it, you know, and, you know, like maybe I come from the school of hard knocks, but I kind of look at it like, you know, things have their time and place. And sometimes the therapies can kind of be used to try and negate the effects of our past choices. And what I've typically seen is when people utilize those, they tend to yo-yo more often because they're trying to sidestep the effects. Whereas if we just live the effects, it may take a little bit longer, but it also has, in my mind, kind of a longer term net positive. And then there's also the possibility that can also deplete certain microbiota in the colon by flushing in and out, right? Which that's where we absorb our food. So, I've never really been drawn to them myself.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I kind of resonate with that. I don't have much experience with it. I feel that sometimes people, if they're sick, you know, really sick, and then they need help, probably they could do it. But definitely depending on that, and then, you know, it's like kind of going against the idea that, you know, you're going to be self-dependent on your health, and, you know, you don't need anything from outside. You just like eat your food and that's enough. So definitely resonate with that point of view.
Like you said too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Apologies. Like I said before too, like I don't like take a black or white, good, bad approach to it. But at the very least, kind of like you said, I think there can be a time and place for anything, and there are options. You know, like that's an option, right? I don't look at it like black and white, but it can be a slippery slope. So kind of like you said, like in certain circumstances, it may negate some pain and make things a little bit faster. But it can be a slippery slope because then it can be overly used and abused. So done with good education and mindfully, it can be positive, but overdone, it can definitely have some negative consequences.
But today, I think these are the questions that I wanted to ask you. And is there anything else that you would like to share, you know, with the people? Any last messages, some inspirational books that you know you would recommend, and also where can people find you? I will link all your links in the comment as well as in the description, so people can reach out to you and find you, and of course learn from your experience.
Appreciate that for sure. Yeah, definitely. You can reach out to me anytime. My main email is chris@therawadvantage.com. My website's therawadvantage.com, and on there you can sign up to my list to get a couple free ebooks and loads of posts. I mean, I've been pretty reliably posting once a week for the last 12 plus years. But luckily I do have different sections of my blog, like a free recipe section and like straight up tips and tools and yoga section and a whole bunch of different stuff. I have my free app on there that has 100 free recipes. So all that stuff is really fun. For something last to kind of leave people with, I'd say, you know, like be really, really easy with yourself. This is a complete unwinding and opening process. And nothing, I think, in life is in a straight line. You know, there's a bit of a dance to it, right? And the more we can listen to the rhythm and be gentle with ourselves in those sways instead of tripping over and judging ourselves for misstepping, the more joyful we're going to be in that dance and that process, you know. And I'd say enjoy every single step of the way. Try your absolute best to be as conscious as you possibly can, no matter what you choose, and just slow down and breathe into the experience. And through doing that, you're much, much more likely to grow through it rather than stumble through it and be hard on yourself.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. And as you go through the journey, to like be gentle on yourself and not be judgmental, because if you create stress around anything, you don't get any positive results. And that's the whole point, you know, of the journey, is to like, why are you eating good food? Because so that you can feel good. So thank you so much for sharing that. Any books or any you know, other inspirational people that you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, specifically diet wise, I'd always recommend the 80-10-10 diet. I think, you know, I've probably read a couple hundred books on health and nutrition, and I think it's probably the best out there specifically on like a holistic raw food diet. I really, really love the book Beyond Words by Siri Satchiananda. It's a really, really great book on kind of a plethora of his different teachings, and I just really, really enjoy that. I love Bruce Lee, Artist of Life. I thought that was a beautiful, beautiful book, and it's kind of like into his philosophy and his different kind of understandings and stuff like that. I thought that was really awesome. A classic, The Power Now, is pretty awesome. Just deep dive into that with Eckhart Tolle. Yeah, I'd say those are probably 4 really fun ones to dive into.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your energy, and thank you everyone for watching the show. Do find him on his channel, and if you're looking to reach out to him, the links are in the description below. Do like and subscribe to this video and share it with your friends, and love you all. Bye bye.